Okay, welcome back to Purposeful Patriarchs. I'm your host Eman, and we're going to go through the Moynihan report, which is again the Department of Labour report into the Negro crisis in America, which was a report written in 1965. So we got halfway through the summary of chapter 4, the Tangle of Pathology. And as I said again, like if you do want to go in detail or more in depth, please have a read of it on the government website, the US government website, and then also as well you could go onto YouTube, and I will try and link below Crimson Cure and also BGS Ibmore, who have done like 9 different parts breaking this down in depth. So I'm not talking from an uneducated or inexperienced point of view. You have a baby boomer and a Gen Xer who have broken this down in greater detail than I have done, and obviously they're the ones who have lived through it. So I'm just taking their experience, and I'm doing my own version of that from UK British context, and because at the end of the day, the image of the black man and the black woman, they will always reference black America and look at us. So we are also affected by this, and I want to sort of break down exactly how we try to move on and actually build our family structure, both in the US and in the UK. I know it's a bit harder in probably in America, but we'll go into those bits soon. So let us go back to chapter 4, which again is called the Tangle of Pathology. So the Tangle of Pathology, and so let's take a look. So we're going to read through that. So let me make sure that I do this properly. Let me bring it up there. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so I hope you can see this properly. So let's get into this. Okay, so we're going down to the second bullet point here. It says, obviously not every instance of social pathology afflicting the Negro community can be traced to the weakness of family structure. If, for example, organized crime in the Negro community were not largely controlled by whites, there would be more capital accumulation among Negroes, and therefore probably more Negro business enterprises. Okay, this again is like people keep asking the questions, why don't black people have more businesses? Okay, and one of the things, if you watch some documentaries on the mafia, on the mob, okay, one of the reasons why Italians, even the American Jews, all these sorts of groups of people, they all have subcultures, okay, and we've spoken a little bit prior in the previous paragraphs about subcultures. All communities have subcultures. The difference that makes the black culture different is that their subculture is the main culture. Okay, so this is why crime is always at the forefront of the black community. Poverty is always at the forefront of the community. So you will see in like the Italian American or the American Italian, whichever way they want to frame it. It says here in the Moynihan report that organized crime in the Negro community is largely controlled by whites. So even when they're doing crime, it's still controlled by whites. And you can see that, and I'll give you a good example. When we talk about hip hop, and we talk about the music in the black community, there are very few black owned or Negro owned record labels. A lot of the enterprises are primarily controlled by white people. So when we think about the control that white people have over the organized crime for one. You could look at sort of the drugs and the crack in the 80s, and how that was pumped into the black community. But then also as well, when you think about the legitimate enterprises that are in the black community, like hip hop, like the fashion brands, like the street fashion brands, like your Fubu's and all those sorts of different things. A lot of that was all largely controlled by whites. So they are extracting the wealth as part of those enterprises. Okay, and this is again why the matriarchal structure doesn't help black people, because if it was a more patriarchal structure, then the black men would be in authority, they would be in power, and they would be in control, and they wouldn't allow their community to be exploited. But when you have the woman in control of the community, which is how the dominant society wants it, then you cannot protect your community, because women don't protect or do not have the power and the authority and the physical enforcement capabilities of men to protect the community. And again, this impacts the wealth in the black community. Okay, so because I was watching the Netflix documentary, what was it called again, on the Negro, on the mafia, and how they brought in the RICO cases, and you see the way they were able to profit from things like fuel taxes, from trash disposal, construction, the unions, like the mob controlled everything, and they were making millions and millions and millions of dollars a week from these enterprises. And this is not to say that you should do crime, but we only talk about crime from from the in the black community from a negative perspective, but other communities are able to profit from crime. And even though they shouldn't be doing that, we shouldn't be sinning against people in and around us, and ultimately God. This is one of the things that really does prop up the the prosperity of other communities. So we'll be lying if we were saying that no other community practices crime. And I just want to sort of explain that to people. So again, the wealth in the black community is also largely controlled by whites, and there are many examples that we could go into about that. So if it were not for the hostility and fear many whites exhibit towards Negroes, they in turn would be less afflicted by hostility and fear, and so on. Okay, so what this is essentially saying is that there is hostility and fear that many white people show towards black people. Okay, and in turn they would be less afflicted by hostility. So you can see that it's a cyclical cycle that's going on in this regard. Okay, there is no one Negro community. There is no one Negro problem. There is no one solution. Nonetheless, at the center of the tangle of pathology is the weakness. Is the weakness of the family structure. Once or twice removed, it will be found to be the principal source of the most aberrant, inadequate, and antisocial behavior that did not establish, but now serves to perpetuate the cycle of poverty and deprivation. Okay, so I think Moynihan is very correct when it comes to this issue, and the weakness of the family structure and the matriarchal structure, where women essentially they're not able to be a man. Okay, they are leading like men, but they are ultimately not men. Okay, it was by destroying the Negro family under slavery that white America broke the will of the Negro people. Okay, so when we think about why can't black people get out of their state, we see that Moynihan basically breaks it down and says that white America broke the will of the Negro people, and this is so sad, man. Like it's like it absolutely breaks me reading this sort of stuff. I take no pleasure in seeing what has gone on from a historical perspective. Because when you essentially break the human will, the human spirit, how can people operate? How can people live when this is their reality? Okay. Although that will has reasserted itself in our time, it is a resurgence doomed to frustration unless the viability of the Negro family is restored. Okay, so at this point in 1965, they've reasserted that will, so they've built it back up again, to try and go again. Okay, but they ultimately have said that they will be frustrated unless the viability of the Negro family is destroyed. So later on, what they will do is, I think, around this time, that was it a few years after, they started to have quite a lot of riots in America. They brought out something called the Kerner Commission, and maybe I'll do that, but I'm not as familiar with the Kerner Commission. That was done again under Lyndon B. Johnson, by a Chicago, was it a Chicago senator or governor, to look into why the riots happened. Okay, and they were looking at how to then change the viability of the Negro family, and they proposed some solutions, and that's when they started to then educate black men. They started to put hands in into black men's hands, but that was short lived, and yeah, we'll break that down further. Okay, so yeah, this will be the end of this episode, and yeah, it's very enlightening to see how so much of this can be traced back. Even when it comes to crime, black people don't even own that 100%. You see that the dominant society is actually engaging in crime, and this is the duplicity and what has possibly enraged black people for such a long time. Even when they're doing wrong, white people are still profiting from wrong, but then they'll also use the laws, and they will also still take away that wealth that is coming from crime, which again, it doesn't happen, or it happens a lot less in other communities, as I reference with the mafia, with some of the with like some maybe the Jewish enterprises, but I haven't gone there. I just referenced mainly the mafia and the Italian side of things. So again, it's all about having an honest discussion about history, and I want to sort of work hard to try and tie all these loose ends together, because it is deeply troubling, because this level of marginalization and penalization is, in my opinion, is still happening today. They're always saying to black people, you see it, or that you have to, take personal responsibility, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. But even still, when black people, even when it comes to crime, and I will go into all the legitimate ways that black people have been marginalized or have tried to do things for themselves, and the dominant society comes in and absolutely destroys it. Okay, so this is why, again, we have to always keep coming to account, and keep bringing the truth to light, because we want to stand on truth, not lies, not myths, not narratives. We want to go back to the reports, go back to the historical documentation, so that we can use that as a foundation to not just hold ourselves as black men accountable, but hold, most importantly, the black women accountable. And also, once you bring yourself to unity, that's when you can demand change in society. Because if you're atomized and you're fragmented, there's no way you can hold that the white supremacy accountable. You can't hold institutional racism accountable. Okay, and this is what we have to keep coming down to. If you can stand on marriage, build families, build communities, you can therefore make more change in society. And we have to do things the right way. And I think ultimately where I come down to this is by following Christ, by following God, we can believe what he says, trust what he says, to build our families. And really, is in general, we need to, as people, we should always be trying to do things God's way, which is to build our families, build on marriage, build on families, and then also then to build wealth, and to ultimately, if we do what's good, we can change the world. Okay, and that's essentially what we need to do. So yeah, this is the end of this episode, chapter 4, Tangle of Pathology. My name is Eman. Please drop a like, share it, screenshot it, drop a comment. Let me know exactly what you think about this content. I think hopefully after this one, I'll start reacting to some of the media clips, and also putting together the narratives around the statistics to show you exactly why things have gotten worse since this report came out, and some of the rhetoric that came out around the time of this report. And I'll ask you a question: whether anything has changed since 1965. All right, God bless. Peace.